We're leaving. Something's very wrong. My wife Lisa whispered in my ear, squeezing my arm hard enough to leave marks. I was standing next to the dessert table, holding a glass of warm champagne, watching my cousin Rebecca cut the wedding cake in her princess dress. The hall was filled with white flowers, golden lights, and the sound of it last playing softly over the speakers. Everything seemed perfect. Too perfect. My name is Henry, and at 32 years old, I never imagined I would be questioning the sanity of my own family at a wedding that was supposed to be a celebration. "Lisa, you're overreacting," I muttered, forcing a smile as I waved to my Uncle Robert, who was sitting at the head table next to the bride's parents. But she didn't let go of my arm. "Henry, listen to me. That man over there is not your grandfather Edmund." My blood ran cold. I looked in the direction she was pointing discreetly. There he was, Grandpa Edmund, 87 years old, perfectly combed white hair, wearing the same navy blue suit he always wore on special occasions. He was smiling and greeting guests, just as he always did. "Of course it's him. What are you talking about?" Lisa pulled my arm, dragging me to a more secluded corner. "The hands, Henry. Look at his hands." I focused my attention. Grandpa Edmund's hands had always been distinctive. He had lost his right pinky finger in a carpentry accident in the 60s. It was a story he proudly told to anyone who would listen. The man at the head table had all 10 fingers. "That's impossible," I whispered, feeling my world begin to crumble. "It must be the angle, or maybe he's wearing a prosthetic." "Henry," Lisa said, her voice trembling, "when was the last time you spoke to your grandfather? In person?" The question hit me like a punch in the stomach. I had been living in Seattle for 4 years, working as a software engineer. Visits to my family in Ohio were rare, major holidays, special birthdays. And in the last 2 years. "Last Christmas," I lied, knowing it was a lie the moment it left my mouth. "No, Henry. It's been longer than that. Remember how your mother always made excuses? He was tired, or sick, or didn't want to be bothered. When was the last time you really talked to him?" My mind raced through memories. Phone calls where my mother answered and said Grandpa was sleeping. Video calls canceled at the last minute. Emails I sent that never got a reply. 3 years. It had been 3 years since I'd had a real conversation with my grandfather. The man at the head table laughed loudly at some joke, and the sound made me flinch. It wasn't Grandpa Edmund's laugh, that hoarse, infectious laugh I'd known since I was a child. This one sounded rehearsed. "We need to leave now," Lisa insisted, and for the first time, I didn't disagree. I grabbed my wallet and car keys, my heart racing. As we quietly made our way toward the exit, I glanced around at the gathered family. My mother, my aunt, my cousins. They all looked nervous, tense, like actors on the first day of rehearsal. And the man who was supposed to be my grandfather continued to smile for the cameras, posing for photos, being the perfect loving grandfather to a family that was perhaps staging the cruelest charade I had ever witnessed. If you're enjoying this family mystery story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel because what we discover next will shake everything you think you know about family trust. But at that moment, as I quietly left my cousin's wedding, I had no idea that I was about to discover a lie that my family had been keeping for years, and that would forever change my understanding of who I could really trust. In the car, Lisa turned the air conditioning on full blast, but my hands were still sweating. I drove silently through the familiar streets of Westerville, Ohio, trying to process what we had just witnessed. "Henry, pull into that grocery store parking lot," Lisa said, pointing to a Kroger on our right. "We need to talk about this properly." I pulled into a spot under a tree and turned off the engine. The silence of the car made everything feel more real. "Lisa, maybe we're overreacting. Maybe he had surgery on his finger or—" "Henry." She turned to face me, her intense green eyes fixed on me. "I've been an occupational therapist for 10 years. I know human anatomy better than most doctors. That man isn't just physically different from your grandfather. His posture is wrong, the way he holds things, even the way he blinks." My stomach churned. Lisa never talked like this about work. She took her profession too seriously to make such sweeping accusations. "Besides," she continued, taking her cell phone out of her purse, "when was the last time you actually talked to your grandfather Edmund? Not a phone call where your mother answered. A real conversation." I closed my eyes and tried to remember. 3 years ago, maybe 4. Grandpa Edmund had called me directly on my cell phone, excited to tell me about a new carpentry project he was working on for Rebecca, my cousin who had just gotten married. He was building a special cabinet for her bedroom, I murmured, the memory coming back vividly. He said he wanted it to be perfect because she had always been his favorite granddaughter. And after that, Cole? My mother started answering whenever I called. She said he was tired or hard of hearing, or didn't want to bother anyone with his old man grumbling. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. Lisa nodded slowly. Henry, your family has a very clear pattern of keeping you at a distance. Since we met 6 years ago, how many times have they invited you to anything important? The question hurt because I knew the answer. This wedding. And only because Rebecca needed more guests to fill the hall. Exactly. And even then, look how they treated you today. Your own mother barely spoke to you. Your Aunt Carol acted like you were a stranger. And that cousin of yours, Derek, kept making jokes about how you abandoned the family to live in Seattle. Derek. My cousin, a year younger than me, who had always been jealous of my career in technology. Today, during the cocktail hour, he had made several comments about how I was the rich cousin who forgot where he came from, and the guy who thinks he's better than everyone else because he lives on the West Coast. Lisa, do you think they're hiding something about Grandpa Edmund? Henry, I think your grandfather may have been dead for years. The words hit me like a punch in the chest. I felt the air rush out of my lungs. That's impossible. They wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do what? Tell you he died. Lisa took my hand. Think about it. When was the last real photo you saw of him? Not those blurry pictures your mom sent you on WhatsApp every now and then. A clear, recent photo. I couldn't remember. And the will, Henry. Did you ever talk to your grandfather about inheritance, about his plans for the property? I remembered a specific conversation, also about 3 years ago. Grandpa Edmund had mentioned that he wanted to leave the family home to me, since I was the only one in the family who really made something of himself, and didn't depend on others his whole life. He said he was going to leave the house to me, I whispered. He said Derek and Rebecca never left the nest, that I was different. Lisa squeezed my hand tighter. Henry, what if your grandfather really had left the house to you? What if your family knew that? The realization hit me like a bolt of lightning. Grandpa Edmund's house was the most valuable property the family owned. A perfectly preserved 1900s Victorian on 2 acres in the most desirable part of Westerville. It was easily worth over $500,000. And my entire family lived there now. My mother had moved there to take care of Dad 2 years ago. Derek and his wife lived in the guest house in the back. Rebecca was living upstairs while she saved up to buy her own house, at 27. They're living in his house, I said aloud, the pieces falling into place. All of them. And if he's dead? And if the will has been read and you've inherited everything, Lisa finished. They'd lose not only the house, but their source of income. Your grandfather had that furniture restoration business, right? Yes. Edmund's Custom Woodworks. A thriving business that served all of Central Ohio. Derek had officially taken over the company 2 years ago, according to my mother. My God, I muttered. If they're hiding his death from me. It's fraud on a grand scale, Lisa said. Identity theft, inheritance fraud, withholding legal information. Henry, this isn't just a family lie. It's a federal crime. I grabbed my cell phone and started dialing my mother's number. I needed answers. Wait, Lisa grabbed my wrist. If they're really doing this, you think they're going to confess over the phone? They'll deny everything and make you look crazy. She was right. If my family was capable of staging an entire marriage with an imposter, they certainly had a story ready for any questions. Then what do we do? Lisa looked at me with that determined expression I knew so well. It was the same face she made when she faced hospital bureaucracy to defend her patients. We're going to investigate. Discreetly. And when we're sure, she paused, we're going to give them exactly what they deserve. At that moment, sitting in a supermarket parking lot on a Sunday afternoon, I realized that my life had been divided into 2 parts, before and after discovering that my own family could have robbed me not only of an inheritance, but also of the chance to say goodbye to the most important man in my childhood. And if that was true, they had no idea of the mistake they had just made in underestimating the forgotten grandson who lived on the other side of the country. On Monday morning, I called the office of the lawyer who had handled Grandpa Edmund's legal affairs for decades, William Thornton. Mr. Thornton, this is Henry Ellis, Edmund Ellis's grandson. I need to verify some information about my grandfather's will. The silence on the other end of the line lasted too long. Henry, the lawyer's voice sounded cautious, you shouldn't be calling me directly. Your mother and I have already discussed this situation at length. My stomach dropped. What situation? Henry, your grandfather passed away 2.5 years ago. The will was executed according to his instructions. I thought you knew that. The words hit me like a hammer. 2.5 years. Not 3 years as Lisa had speculated, but still, more than 2 years of lies. Mr. Thornton, did I inherit anything? You inherited pretty much everything. The house, the business, the bank accounts. Your parents and cousins received token amounts, but Edmund was very clear about his intentions. My hands began to shake. And where are these properties now? Well, technically they're in your name, but your family continues to manage everything temporarily until you're ready to take on the responsibilities. At least, that's what your mother told me you had requested. Lies. I never requested anything. Mr. Thornton, I never said that. I didn't even know my grandfather had died. The silence stretched out again, longer this time. Henry, I need you to come to my office immediately. When I arrived at Thornton's office 2 hours later, Lisa by my side, the elderly lawyer showed me a thick folder of documents that completely changed my understanding of the situation. Your grandfather left very specific instructions, he explained, adjusting his glasses. He suspected that your family would try to contest the will or manipulate you in some way. So he created safeguards. Thornton opened a second folder. He also left this for you. It was a handwritten letter in Grandpa Edmund's familiar handwriting. Henry, if you're reading this, it means you've probably discovered that your family wasn't honest about my death. I'm not surprised. They've always been very good at protecting their own interests. I left everything to you because you were the only one who built something on your own, without relying on family money. But I know they will try to prevent you from taking what is yours. That's why I set up a special trust fund. If anyone tries to use my property or businesses without your express permission for more than 6 months after my death, all assets will automatically be transferred to a legal institution that will guarantee your rights. The deadline expires in exactly 3 weeks from today. You have always been my favorite grandson, Henry. Don't let them convince you otherwise. With love, Grandpa Edmund. The date on the letter was 3 months before his death. Henry, Thornton said gently, your family has been living illegally on your property for 2.5 years. They are operating your business without legal authorization. And technically, they committed fraud by hiding Edmund's death from the tax authorities and from you. Lisa held my hand as I processed the information. What happens if the trust fund expires? All assets will be transferred to a law firm specializing in asset recovery. They will take possession of everything, liquidate the assets, and you will receive the cash. Your family would lose not only the right to continue living there, but also any chance of negotiating an amicable transition. 3 weeks. 3 weeks to decide whether I wanted to completely destroy my family or find some way to resolve this without annihilating them. There's something else, Thornton continued, pulling out a smaller envelope. Your grandfather instructed me to give this to you only if you found out the truth on your own. Inside the envelope was a key and an address I didn't recognize. It's a storage unit he rented in your name 3 years ago. He said you'd know what to do with the contents when the time came. We left the office in silence. In the car, Lisa finally spoke. Henry, you have enough evidence to prosecute them criminally. Fraud, embezzlement, document forgery. Derek especially could go to prison for operating the business illegally. I drove on autopilot, my mind racing through the possibilities. But I could also just take possession of everything and kick them out, I muttered. Legally, they have no claim to anything. What do you want to do? I stopped at a red light and looked at her. I want to go to that warehouse first. I need to know what else my grandfather left me. The storage unit was on the other side of town. When I opened the door with the key, I found something I wasn't expecting, dozens of organized boxes, each labeled with dates and names of family members. The first box I opened contained detailed financial documents showing how Derek had embezzled money from the business into his personal accounts. The second had audio recordings, conversations my mother and Derek had about keeping Henry away until things calmed down. Grandpa Edmund had systematically documented every lie, every manipulation, every attempt by the family to exclude me from important decisions. The last box had a different label, for when Henry decides he's had enough. Inside were copies of all the fraudulent contracts Derek had signed using Grandpa Edmund's name after his death, detailed photographs of expensive improvements they had made to the house using the inheritance money, and a complete list of all the assets they had secretly sold. At the bottom of the box was one last letter. Henry, if you've made it this far, it means they've finally gone too far. I'm sure your mother has made up some excuse as to why you can't know about my death. They may even have staged some kind of charade to keep you away. You have two choices. You can use this evidence to destroy them completely, or you can use it as leverage to get back what is yours and give them one last chance to do the right thing. The choice is yours, but remember, they had 2 years to tell you the truth. They chose to lie. Don't be like them, Henry. Be better. But don't be a fool either. I closed the box and looked at Lisa. They have no idea what's coming. For the first time since the wedding, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, but the cold smile of someone who had just discovered they held all the winning cards. And the 3-week deadline meant I would have plenty of time to plan exactly how I wanted to play each one. I spent the next week acting as if nothing had happened. Lisa and I returned to Seattle, maintaining our normal routine, but every night I meticulously studied every document Grandpa Edmund had left behind. The strategy had to be perfect. On Thursday, I called Derek pretending I wanted to talk about family business. Henry. What a surprise, his voice sounded genuinely cheerful. I thought you were too busy with your rich life in Seattle to call your family. Actually, Derek, I was thinking about investing in Grandpa Edmund's business. Maybe bring in some technology, modernize operations. The silence on the other end lasted a full 5 seconds. Oh man, it's just, well, Grandpa isn't really involved in the business anymore. I'm running everything now. He's more focused on resting. I see. But do you have the books in order? I'd like to take a look at the numbers before making any investments. Sure. I just need to organize a few things first. You know how it is, paperwork, boring stuff. I wrote down the date of the call. Derek had just admitted that he was operating the business without legal authorization, and I had the recording. On Saturday, I called my mother. Henry, dear. She sounded surprised but cautious. How was your flight back? Fine, Mom. I was thinking, it's been a long time since I've had a real conversation with Grandpa Edmund. Could I give him a call directly? Oh dear, you know how he is. His hearing isn't what it used to be, and he gets confused with phones. I'd better give him your messages. How about a video call then? Or can I visit next week? Henry, why the sudden insistence? You didn't show much interest before. The accusation in her voice made me smile wryly. Maybe because I've realized that time is precious, Mom. And family is important. Well, he's going through a difficult time. Maybe in a few weeks. A few weeks could be too late, Mom. The silence stretched out. What do you mean by that? Just that people his age, we never know how much time we have, do we? When I hung up, my mother had promised to try to arrange something, but had not committed to a specific date. More evidence that they were desperately hiding something. On Monday, I implemented phase 2 of the plan. I called 3 of Edmund's Custom Woodwork's top clients, introducing myself as Edmund's grandson and future partner in the company. The first call was revealing. Mr. Patterson, this is Henry Ellis, Edmund's grandson. I'm taking over some responsibilities in the business and would like to review our current contract. Henry. Edmund spoke highly of you over the years. I'm sorry for your loss, by the way. Your grandfather was an exceptional man. My heart raced. I'm sorry, Mr. Patterson. Loss. Oh. His voice changed immediately. Well, I thought you knew. Edmund passed away a couple of years ago, didn't he? Derek, his cousin, took over the contracts. He didn't mention that you were involved now. No, Mr. Patterson. Derek didn't mention anything. If you follow stories about complicated families like this one, subscribe to the channel because we still have many twists and turns ahead of us on this journey of family discoveries. After the call, I sat in silence for 20 minutes. An important client had known about Grandpa Edmund's death for 2 years, but my own family had staged an elaborate charade to keep me in the dark. The cruelty of it took my breath away. I called the other 2 clients. Both knew of the death. Both expressed condolences and mentioned how Derek had kindly taken over their pending projects during this difficult time for the family. Not only was Derek illegally operating the business, he was using Grandpa Edmund's death as a marketing strategy to generate sympathy and keep clients. On Tuesday, I decided to visit the local cemetery in Westerville. It took me 2 hours to find it, but I finally did, a simple headstone with the name Edmund Ellis and his dates of birth and death. The date of death confirmed what the lawyer had said 2.5 years ago. There were fresh flowers on the grave. White roses with a card that read "Forever missed, his loving family." The hypocrisy made me sick. I took pictures of everything, including cemetery records that confirmed when and who had arranged the burial. It wasn't me. I wasn't consulted. I wasn't even informed. On Wednesday, I decided to test how far my family's charade would go. I sent an email to my mother. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about our conversation. I'd like to send Grandpa Edmund a special gift in the mail. Can you send me the exact address and full name for delivery?" The reply came within 2 hours. "Dear, how sweet of you. But you know how confused Grandpa gets with deliveries. It's better if you send it to me and I'll give it to him myself. He'll be so happy." I sent another email. "Actually, I want it to be a surprise. He might not recognize my name on the envelope, so I'll just write 'From your favorite grandson.' He'll know it's me." This time the reply took 6 hours. "Henry, it really is better to send it to me. Dad is going through a phase where unexpected gifts make him anxious. Trust me on this one. Trust me." The words my mother used when I was a child, and she wanted me to stop asking questions about things that were none of my business. On Thursday, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Thornton's office and scheduled a formal meeting for the following Monday, exactly 2 weeks before the trust fund was set to expire. "Mr. Thornton, I want to take formal possession of all the property my grandfather left me. And I want to notify my family officially that they are living illegally on my property." "Henry, are you sure you want to do this? Once we start legal proceedings." "I'm absolutely sure." "And Mr. Thornton?" "I also want to sue Derek for operating my business without authorization, and the entire family for fraud and concealment of legal information. That could result in jail time for some of them. They had 2.5 years to do the right thing. They chose to deceive me at every opportunity." When I hung up, I felt a strange calm. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness. It was the quiet feeling of someone who had finally decided to stop being a victim. Lisa found me that night organizing all the documents on the dining room table. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like someone who is about to give my family exactly what they deserve." She sat down next to me and held my hand. "And then? What happens after all this is over?" I looked at her, then at the piles of evidence scattered across the table: photographs, fraudulent contracts, recordings, client statements, bank records. "Then, Lisa, we go home. Our real home. And we build a life away from people who think that lies and manipulation are acceptable forms of family love." The clock was ticking. In exactly 13 days, I would either take control of the situation or lose forever the chance to do justice to Grandpa Edmund's legacy. But for the first time since the wedding, I knew exactly what I was going to do. And they had no idea of the hurricane that was about to hit them. On Monday morning, I parked in front of Grandpa Edmund's house, my house now, with 3 cars following me. The first was Mr. Thornton's lawyer. The second was 2 bailiffs. The third was a private investigator I had hired to document everything. Derek was on the porch when I got out of the car, watering plants my grandfather had planted decades ago. "Henry! What a surprise. I didn't know you were in town." "Derek," I replied calmly, walking up to him with a briefcase in my hands. "We need to talk." My mother appeared at the door, still in her bathrobe, with a look of panic on her face. "Henry, honey, what's going on? Why are there so many people here?" Thornton approached her and handed her an official envelope. "Mrs. Ellis, This is a formal eviction notice. You have 72 hours to vacate the property." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Derek's hose hitting the ground. "Eviction?" my mother stammered. "This is ridiculous. This is our home." "Actually," I said, opening my briefcase, "it's my house. I legally inherited it from Grandpa Edmund when he died 2.5 years ago." Derek turned pale. "Henry, what are you talking about? Grandpa's fine, he's just dead, Derek. He's dead. And you know it." That's when Thornton handed out copies of the death certificate. My mother collapsed into the porch chair. When did you find out?" "At your staged wedding, Rebecca," I replied, looking at my cousin who had appeared in the doorway. "When you got my uncle to play the part of Grandpa Edmund." Rebecca started to cry. "Henry, we can explain." "No need. I already know everything." I opened my briefcase and started handing out documents. Here are the bank records showing how Derek embezzled $240,000 from the business into personal accounts. Here are the fraudulent contracts he signed using Grandpa's name after he died. And this, I took out a small tape recorder, are the conversations you had about keeping me away until things calmed down. Derek tried to speak, but I continued. Grandpa Edmund saw all this coming. He documented every lie, every manipulation, every attempt you made to exclude me. He knew you would try to rob me. I showed her my grandfather's handwritten letter. My mother read it silently, her hands shaking. "Henry," she whispered, "you don't understand. We did this for you, to protect you from pain." "Lies!" I exploded, finally losing my composure. "You did this for the money. For the house. For the business. You robbed me of 2.5 years of mourning, you prevented me from saying goodbye to him, and you even had the audacity to stage a birthday party with an actor." The private investigator was photographing everything. The bailiffs were waiting for instructions. "There's more," I continued, pulling out a second folder. "The business clients who knew about his death years ago. The cemetery records showing who arranged the funeral, without consulting me. And the emails you exchanged about how to manage Henry when I started asking questions." Derek finally found his voice. "Henry, we're family. We can work this out among ourselves, without lawyers, without family." I laughed bitterly. Family doesn't lie about death. Family doesn't steal inheritance. Family doesn't stage elaborate plays to keep a grandson away from his own grandfather's funeral. My mother stood up, trying one last card. "Henry, you can't do this to us. Where are we going to live? Derek has young children." "You should have thought of that before you committed federal fraud," I replied coldly. That's when Rebecca tried a different approach. "Henry, what do you want? Money? We can pay you back, we can." "What do I want?" I interrupted. "I want you to pay for every lie. I want Derek prosecuted for illegally running my business. I want you to face the consequences of every choice you've made in the last 2.5 years." Thornton stepped closer. "Henry, the paperwork is all in order. We can proceed with criminal charges." I looked at my family, my former family, for the last time as a group. They seemed smaller now, shrunk by the reality of their actions. "You have 72 hours, I repeated. "After that, any property left behind is trespassing." As I walked back to my car, Derek yelled after me. "Henry, you're going to regret this. You can't destroy your own family." I stopped, turned around, and smiled for the first time in weeks. "Derek, you destroyed the family when you decided that lying was easier than being honest. I'm just cleaning up the mess." What they didn't know yet was that the 72 hours were just the beginning. I had discovered something in the storage unit that would change everything forever. 3 days after the eviction, I received a call that changed everything. "Mr. Ellis, this is Detective Morrison with the Westerville Police Department. We need to talk about the evidence you provided." I met him at the same storage facility where Grandpa Edmund had kept decades of family secrets. But what I hadn't shown anyone yet was in the last section, locked with a second key I found sewn into the lining of one of the boxes. "Henry," Morrison said, examining the documents, "this isn't just simple fraud. It's organized criminal conspiracy." In the secret section, Grandpa Edmund had documented not only the lies about his death, but an elaborate plan that my family had been executing for years. They weren't just hiding his death, they had planned his isolation long before that. The audio recordings I found were devastating. "Henry will never find out if we control his access," was my mother's voice, in a conversation from 4 years ago. "Dad is really getting senile. We can use that to our advantage. What if he insists on visiting?" Derek's voice. "We'll make up a story about Dad being sick, in the hospital, anything. The important thing is to keep Henry in Seattle until," her voice trailed off, "until nature takes its course." They were waiting for my grandfather to die, actively planning to keep him isolated from me so he couldn't change his will. But there was more. Fake medical documents showed that they had convinced Grandpa Edmund that I didn't want to talk to him anymore. Fake letters in my handwriting, saying I was too busy with my life in Seattle to worry about family problems. My grandfather died believing I had abandoned him. The revelation left me breathless for 20 minutes. "Mr. Ellis," Morrison continued, "we also found evidence that your family altered your grandfather's medications in the last months of his life. Nothing lethal, but substances that accelerate cognitive decline. They wanted him to seem less competent to testify against them if necessary." Derek would now face charges of elder abuse, in addition to fraud. My mother would be charged with conspiracy and document falsification. Rebecca and her husband, accomplices at every turn, would face charges as co-conspirators. But the most shocking piece of evidence was at the end of Grandpa Edmund's last recording, made 2 weeks before his death. "Henry, if you're listening to this, it means my time is up and they've finally shown their true colors. I want you to know that I never believed any of the lies they told you about me. I know you love me, I know you would have come if you had known I was ill. They tried to convince me that you had changed, that you no longer cared about your family. But I've known them all my life, Henry. I know every lie they are capable of telling. I left everything to you not only because you deserve it, but because I know you'll do the right thing. You've always been different from them. You have integrity. Use what you find here not only to get back what's yours, but to make sure they can never hurt anyone else like this." When the recording ended, I cried for the first time since the wedding. Not out of sadness, but out of relief. My grandfather never doubted me. 2 weeks later, the trial began. Derek was sentenced to 2 years in prison for fraud, elder abuse, and operating an illegal business. The judge was particularly harsh on him. "Mr. Patterson," she said, using his real name, "you didn't just steal money. You stole the last years of dignity from an elderly man and deprived his grandson of the right to say goodbye. That demonstrates a cruelty that goes beyond simple greed." My mother received 18 months in prison with probation and 500 hours of community service. During the sentencing, she looked at me once. There was no remorse in her eyes, just the cold anger of someone who had been caught. Rebecca and her husband received heavy fines and probation. Their marriage did not survive the scandal. I found out later that he had blamed her for dragging him into it, and filed for divorce 2 months after the trial. But true justice came in a different form. The story spread through the local media, then nationally. Family stages birthday party for dead grandfather to hide inheritance made headlines for weeks. Derek lost not only his business, but any chance of working in carpentry in Ohio. No one hires someone known for operating with forged documents. My mother, who had always prided herself on her reputation in the community, became a pariah. Neighbors who had greeted her for decades now crossed the street to avoid her. Rebecca, who had planned to use the wedding to launch an event planning business, saw every client cancel when the truth came out. Who would hire someone capable of orchestrating such an elaborate hoax? As for me, I took official possession of all of Grandpa Edmund's property. The house, completely renovated, became a community center for seniors, something I know he would have approved of. The carpentry business was sold to one of his former employees, with a commitment to maintain the high standards of quality that Grandpa Edmund had established. With the money from the sale and other investments he had made, I established a foundation in his name. The Edmund Ellis Foundation provides free legal support to families facing inheritance disputes or elder abuse. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter in prison. It was from Derek. "Henry, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know that it wasn't my idea from the beginning. It was Mom who suggested hiding the death. I just went along with it because I needed the money. My family was struggling financially. It's no excuse, I know. But I wanted you to know that Grandpa Edmund talked about you constantly. Right up until the end. He always said you were his pride and joy. I'm deeply sorry for what we did. I didn't respond to the letter. Not out of anger, but because some bridges, once burned completely, cannot be rebuilt. And maybe that's for the best. Lisa and I decided to move back to Ohio permanently. Seattle had been our escape, but we realized that running away from problems doesn't solve them, it just postpones them. Now, I work remotely as a technology consultant while overseeing the foundation. Lisa opened an occupational therapy clinic specializing in seniors, using some of the inheritance money to ensure she would never have to turn away a patient for financial reasons. Every morning, I have coffee in Grandpa Edmund's old armchair, which we brought to our new house, and read the thank you letters that arrive from families the foundation has helped. One of them stood out to me. Mr. Ellis, my 85-year-old father was being manipulated by my younger brother, who had convinced him to change his will. Thanks to your foundation, we were able to get lawyers who exposed the manipulation and protected Dad. He is still with us, surrounded by people who truly love him. Thank you for turning your pain into protection for others. That's what Grandpa Edmund meant by doing the right thing. 3 years later, I ran into Derek by chance at a supermarket. He had lost a lot of weight and looked 10 years older. He was working as a cashier, ironic for someone who once ran a six-figure business. He saw me first and hesitated. For a moment, I thought he was going to avoid me. Instead, he approached me. "Henry," he said simply. "Derek. You're okay?" "I'm fine. How are you?" He gave a sad smile. "Surviving. Working honestly for the first time in a long time." We stood there in silence for a few seconds. "Henry, I'm really sorry. For everything." I looked at him, not with anger or satisfaction, but with something closer to understanding. "I know, Derek. And I hope you find your peace." As I walked away, I felt something I hadn't expected, not victory or revenge, but genuine closure. The real transformation hadn't happened when the lawsuits were won or when I regained my inheritance. It happened when I realized that the greatest honor I could give to Grandpa Edmund's memory was not to destroy the people who hurt me, but to build something that would prevent others from going through the same pain. If you are following this journey of justice and family overcoming adversity, subscribe to the channel for more stories about how the truth always finds a way to prevail, even when all seems lost. Today, when I visit Grandpa Edmund's grave, I don't just bring flowers. I bring reports from the foundation, showing how many families have been protected, how many elderly people have been defended from manipulation, how many inheritances have been preserved for their true beneficiaries. The headstone remains the same, simple and dignified. But I added a small plaque next to it. Edmund Ellis, carpenter, grandfather, protector of truth. His wisdom continues to build bridges and protect families. The foundation in his name has helped over 1,000 families. True love does not die, it multiplies. The last time I was there, an elderly lady was planting flowers on the grave next door. We started talking, and I found out she was a volunteer at our foundation. "Did you know Edmund Ellis?" she asked, noticing where I was standing. "He was my grandfather." Her eyes lit up. "So you're Henry. Your foundation saved my family. My son-in-law was trying to force me to sell my house to him for a ridiculous price. Your lawyers found out that he had forged documents." We smiled together, two people united by a common mission to protect the vulnerable. "Your grandfather would be proud," she said. "He created something that will live on long after he's gone." As I left the cemetery that afternoon, I finally understood the last lesson Grandpa Edmund wanted to teach me, that true legacy isn't the material possessions we leave behind, but the positive impact our actions have on the lives of others long after we're gone. Derek, my mother, Rebecca, they all chose the easy path of manipulation and lies. They paid the price for that choice. I chose the harder path, to turn betrayal into protection, pain into purpose, personal inheritance into community legacy. And while they lost everything trying to steal what wasn't theirs, I gained something no one could ever give me, the certainty that Grandpa Edmund would be truly proud of the man I've become. Not for winning a legal battle, but for choosing to build bridges instead of simply burning those that others tried to destroy. That is the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge ends when the enemy falls. Justice continues to build a better world, long after the wounds have healed.